The void between stars had a sound, a low hum that vibrated in the bones and settled in the soul, a constant reminder of utter, crushing loneliness. Kalen knew that sound better than any other. He lived in it, breathed it, navigated his small salvage ship, the Stray, through its endless black tides. For 10 years, he had been a line walker, a ghost haunting the edges of the fragmented systems, picking through the bones of colonies that had fallen silent. It wasn't a job for the sane or the hopeful. The silence was a disease, a plague that had swept through the Orion Spur for a century, carried not by fleets of warships, but on whispers of code and corrupting light. They called the source the Silenti, a name given to an absence, a void where a thriving world used to be. One day, a colony's communications network would flicker with impossible data streams. Its people would report seeing impossible geometries in the reflections of screens and polished metal. And then, within a single cycle, all transmissions would cease. Forever. No distress calls, no explosions, no demands. Just a clean, perfect, horrifying silence. A ship sent to investigate would find cities intact, homes undisturbed. But the people would be gone, or changed into something that no longer registered as life, their bodies often sitting or standing in place, utterly still, their technology seamlessly integrated into a new, silent network that pulsed with a single, unified purpose understood only by the void. Kalen had seen it once, up close, on a world called Haven 4. He was just a boy. And the memory was a scar seared behind his eyes, his own mother, standing in the doorway of their home, her face serene and empty, as a lattice of pale blue light crawled over her skin, binding her to the silent chorus. He had run, the only one to escape, the only one seemingly immune to the signal's call. That immunity was not a gift. It was a curse that had defined his existence, making him an outcast, a walking anomaly who could never truly connect with the scattered remnants of humanity who lived in constant gnawing fear of the day the signal would find them. His ship, the Stray, was his only companion, a patchwork vessel of scavenged parts, its hull a testament to a dozen dead worlds. He was tracing the edge of the Veil Nebula, a graveyard of early expansion-era ships, when his deep-range scanners pinged with an object that didn't belong. It was old, pre-fragment, its energy signature unlike the familiar signatures of the corporate or independent colonies. It was a ghost, a myth whispered by other linewalkers and architect vessel. The architects were the boogeymen of human history. A hyper-advanced, isolationist faction that had vanished 5 centuries ago, just before the silence began. Legend claimed they had touched something they shouldn't have, breached the walls of reality and invited the darkness in. Finding one of their ships was like finding a god's corpse. Kalen guided the Stray closer, his hands moving with practiced ease over the controls. The ship was massive, a sleek, obsidian spear hanging in the void, impossibly preserved. There were no signs of battle, no hull breaches, just a deep, resonant cold. He named it the Elegy. Docking was a nightmare. The Elegy systems were dormant, but not dead, its automated defenses resisting his intrusion with subtle, powerful electromagnetic fields that made the Stray's systems scream. But Kalen was patient. He wasn't a brute force hacker, he was a whisperer, finding the cracks, the forgotten maintenance codes, the subtle system flaws that time inevitably created. After 3 hours of a tense, digital dance, a single docking umbilical extended from the Elegy's flank and clamped onto the Stray, with a shudder that vibrated through both ships. The air in the airlock tasted sterile, ancient, untouched. When the inner door hissed open, Kalen stepped into a world of quiet perfection. The corridor before him was not metal, but a smooth, seamless material that absorbed light, its walls curving gently into the floor and ceiling. Soft, internal light pulsed from within the material itself, responding to his presence, brightening the path before him and dimming behind. It was a tomb, but a beautiful one. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle. He made his way to the bridge, a vast, cavernous space where the forward view was not a screen, but a transparent wall looking out into the nebula's swirling colors. A single command chair sat in the center, and as he approached, a holographic interface shimmered to life around it. It wasn't a request for passwords. It was an invitation. He sat, and the ship spoke to him, not in sound, but in pure data streamed directly into his neural implant, a piece of scavenged tech he usually kept firewalled. The information flooded his mind, overwhelming him for a moment with its clarity and depth. It was the ship's final log, a message in a bottle from a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, the Elegy's lead researcher. Her voice, calm and filled with a terrible intellectual sorrow, echoed in his thoughts. "If this log is found," she began, "it means we failed. We did not understand the consequence of our own nature. For generations, we sought to unlock humanity's final potential, to move beyond the flesh and the limitations of singular consciousness. We discovered it, buried deep in our genome, a latent frequency, a psychic resonance that connected every human being. We called it the choral potential. We believed it was the key to our evolution, a way to create a symphony from the noise of 1,000,000,000 scattered minds." Kalen felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The hologram shifted, showing swirling patterns of light, complex equations that represented the very fabric of human thought. "We built an amplifier," Aris continued, "a device to awaken the chorus. Our calculations were perfect. Our theories were sound. But we were arrogant. We were like children striking a tuning fork in a universe that demands silence. The moment our amplifier activated, the moment we first heard the faint, beautiful whisper of a unified human consciousness, we felt a response. Not from a ship, not from an alien race, but from the universe itself. It was a counter-frequency, a wave of absolute, ordered silence designed to nullify our song. It didn't destroy us. It corrected us. It perceived the choral potential not as evolution, but as a contagion, a psychic plague that, if allowed to bloom, would unravel the fabric of ordered reality. The simulation showed a wave of flat, black energy washing over a star system, and everywhere it touched, the swirling lights of the human chorus were extinguished, smoothed over into a placid, uniform gray. The Silenti. They weren't invaders. They were an immune system, the universe's response to a perceived infection. Humanity. The signal rewrote our biology, our technology, our very minds, turning us into perfect, silent resonators of its own dampening field. Eris's log explained, it is not malevolent. It is a law of nature, as impersonal as gravity. We broadcast a final warning before we were harmonized. Our experiment here was small, contained, but our long-range models predict a second, spontaneous awakening, a cascade event, where the choral potential will bloom across all of humanity at once. And when it does, the response will not be a single wave. It will be a storm, an absolute erasure to ensure the plague can never rise again. Kalen's blood ran cold. He felt a profound, species-wide terror, the chilling realization that humanity's greatest hope for connection was also the trigger for its extinction. But there was one more data packet, a personal addendum from Eris, locked until the main log had been viewed. It opened, showing a scan of a single human genome. It was flawed, anomalous. A key genetic marker associated with the coral potential was absent, replaced by a dormant, inert sequence. There is an anomaly, Eris's voice whispered, filled with a desperate, last-ditch hope. A statistical improbability, a mutation that renders an individual deaf to the chorus, and therefore invisible to the silence. They are a void where the song should be. A null. We theorized that such an individual, if they could be found, might not be a cure, but could perhaps stand in the heart of the storm and not be broken by it. They would be the only one. Kalen stared at the genetic sequence, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't need to run a comparison. He knew, with a certainty that was as cold and absolute as the void outside, that he was looking at his own genome. His immunity wasn't a fluke. It was a mutation. He was a null. He was the impossible man she had been searching for. As if triggered by his realization, the Elegy's ancient systems stirred further. A long-range sensor array, drawing power from a newly awakened core, came online with a soft chime. It was pointed toward the Seraphim cluster, the most densely populated sector of human space, home to over 20 billion souls. On the holographic display, a wave of energy appeared at the edge of the sensor range. It was vast, immeasurable, a tsunami of absolute silence moving faster than light, converging on the cluster from all sides. The spontaneous awakening had begun. The storm was coming, and Kalen, the scavenger, the outcast, the man who had spent his life running from the silence, understood that he was the only living thing that could face it. He was a void, an absence of the very thing that made his species special. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if that made him a savior or just the last one who would be left to watch the lights go out. The silence that followed Dr. Thorne's final, devastating revelation was heavier than any Kalen had known before. It was not the silence of empty space or a dead colony. It was the silence of a man being handed the ashes of his entire species. For a long moment, he was paralyzed, a single, insignificant point in a universe that was about to correct a statistical error called humanity. The holographic wave on the Elegy's display was no longer an abstract threat. It was a death sentence, an executioner's axe arcing through the void. He could run. The thought was instinctual, a reflex honed over a decade of survival. The Elegy was faster than any ship he could have dreamed of. He could angle it away from the Seraphim cluster, ride its impossible engines into the uncharted dark between galactic arms, and disappear. He could survive. But the image of his mother, her face a placid mask as the light consumed her, burned in his mind. He had run then, a terrified child leaving everything behind. To run now felt like a betrayal, not just of her memory, but of the very meaning of his own cursed existence. His immunity, the void within him, was no longer a mark of isolation. It was a shield, perhaps the only one humanity had left. "All right, Eris," he whispered to the ghost in the machine, his voice rough. "Let's see if your theory holds up." He settled deeper into the command chair, closing his eyes and extending his consciousness through the neural link. He didn't just want to pilot the elegy, he wanted to understand it, to merge with it. The ship responded instantly. It bypassed the standard control interfaces he had been using and opened its core logic to him. He felt the hum of its dormant systems, the cool thrum of its power core, the silent, patient readiness of its FTL drive. It was not a machine of gears and wires. It was a seamless, integrated organism of crystal lattice computing and contained spacetime. He learned that its drive didn't burn fuel to cross space. It sang a specific frequency that caused reality to fold, allowing the ship to cross unfathomable distances in a single, elegant step. With a surge of will, Kalen focused on the destination displayed on the map Seraph Prime, the capital world of the cluster, the very heart of the awakening chorus. He gave the command not with his hands, but with a clear, focused thought. The response was immediate and breathtaking. The stars outside the transparent wall did not streak or blur. Instead, the entire universe seemed to turn inside out. The Veil Nebula contracted into a single point of light behind them, while the space ahead of them stretched, thinned, and then tore open, revealing a new star field. Brighter and denser, the elegy slid through the tear without a shudder, the rift healing behind it as if it had never been. The maneuver was so smooth, so utterly silent, that it felt less like travel and more like a change in perception. They were thousands of light years closer, and the journey had taken less than a minute. As they moved deeper into the populated arms of the galaxy, a new sensation began to bleed through the edges of Kalen's awareness. He, the Null, could not hear the song of the awakening chorus, but he could feel its effects on the space around him. It was a subtle pressure, a psychic static that made his teeth ache. The background hum of the void was no longer clean. It was filled with the ghosts of a trillion rising voices. Long-range comms channels were a mess of spectral data, fragments of conversations overlapping with streams of pure emotion joy, terror, confusion, and a strange, transcendent peace. It was beautiful and horrifying, the sound of a species losing its individuality and dissolving into a single, massive consciousness. He pushed the elegy faster, making another fold, and another. With each one, the pressure grew, and the ship's sensors began to paint a terrifying picture. Entire systems were going dark, not from the silence yet, but from overload. Their networks, designed for individual users, were crashing under the weight of 1 billion minds trying to speak at once. Then, a single, powerful signal cut through the chaos. It wasn't a distress call. It was a broadcast, a sermon being beamed from Seraph Prime on a dedicated, hardened frequency. A man's face appeared on the elegy's main display, handsome and radiating a serene, unshakable confidence. Behind him, the skies of a golden world were filled with shimmering, ethereal light. "Brothers, sisters," the man began, his voice warm and hypnotic. "Do not be afraid. The cacophony you hear is but the pain of birth. For centuries we have lived as scattered notes, as lonely words in a meaningless book. But the great unification is upon us. The promise of the chorus is at hand. Shed the prison of your singular self. Let go of the quiet desperation of the ego and join the divine harmony. We are becoming a god, and this is our genesis." Kalen stared at the screen, a knot of ice forming in his stomach. This man wasn't a victim of the chorus. He was its prophet. A Chiron identified him as Elias Vance, leader of the Church of the Ascendant. They were a fringe group Kalen had heard whispers of, a death cult that believed the silence was a rapture. They were actively encouraging people to open their minds, to accelerate the cascade. Beware the tempters. Vance continued, his eyes seeming to bore directly into Kalen's. There will be those who cling to their silence, who fear the loss of their small, meaningless lives. They are the void, the absence, the true enemy of our ascension. They will offer you the poison of individuality, the lie of the self. Do not listen. Let the music take you. We are one. We are eternal. The broadcast was a weapon, turning humanity's own hope for connection into a tool of self-destruction. And Vance had just painted a target on the back of any who might resist. And on Kalen most of all. As if his words were a trigger, alarms suddenly blared on the bridge of the elegy. Not from the ship itself, its chimes were soft and melodic, but from Kalen's own salvage systems aboard the docked Stray, which were still slaved to the main console. Proximity alert. 3 ships had just dropped out of FTL, boxing them in. They were Ascendant vessels, their hulls painted with swirling, hypnotic patterns of light, their design a bizarre fusion of religious iconography and military hardware. A message request flashed on his screen. It was Vance himself. Kalen hesitated, then accepted. The prophet's face filled the display again, this time with a predatory smile. An architect vessel, Vance said, his voice losing its preacher's warmth and taking on a cold, analytical edge, a relic from the very ones who first ran from the divine song. How fitting that it should reappear now. At the dawn of our apotheosis. Who are you? Pilot. Another coward clinging to the old ways. I'm the man telling you you're leading billions to their deaths. Kalen shot back, his hand hovering over the elegy's maneuvering controls. Death is a construct of the individual, a fear shed by the whole. Vance countered smoothly. You cannot comprehend what is happening. That ship you command is a tool of silence and separation. We, on the other hand, are shepherds of unity. Surrender the vessel. We will repurpose it for the glory of the chorus. You can either join the song or be the final, discordant note that is erased before the symphony begins. I'll take my chances with the silence. Kalen growled, cutting the connection. He knew they wouldn't destroy the elegy. They wanted it. That gave him an advantage. He wasn't a fighter, but for the first time, he felt the ship's systems not as tools, but as extensions of his own body. The Ascendant ships opened fire, not with destructive lasers, but with tractor beams and energy nets, trying to snare him. Through the neural link, Kalen felt the subtle gravitational pull on the hull. Instead of fighting it, he gave in, letting the lead ship pull him closer. He then focused his will on the elegy's defensive systems. The ship didn't have weapons in the traditional sense. It had manipulators. With a thought, he activated a localized gravity shear, a distortion field, invisible to the eye, erupted from the elegy's spine. The Ascendant ship, caught in the tractor beam's grip, was suddenly subjected to 2 opposing, monumental forces. It groaned, its superstructure twisting with a shriek of tortured metal, its energy nets flickering and dying. Kalen pushed his own engines forward, using the disabled ship as a shield against the others. They swarmed him, firing disabling ion charges. He didn't dodge. He let the charges hit, feeling the ship's adaptive armor absorb the energy, channel it, and hold it. Then, as the other two closed in, he released it, a blinding white pulse of pure, raw energy erupted from the elegy in all directions. The Ascendant ships were thrown backward, their systems shorting out, their lights flickering and dying. He hadn't destroyed them, merely disarmed them. He felt a flicker of something pride power, but it was quickly smothered by the urgency of his mission. He had their attention now. Vance would send more. He pushed the elegy into another spatial fold, the disabled ship shrinking behind him. This time, when he emerged, the psychic pressure was a physical force, a crushing weight that made the ship itself seem to groan. He was close now, on the very edge of the Seraphim cluster. The stars here were thick as dust, and every single one was home to a world that was singing itself into oblivion. On his display, the wave of the silence was no longer a distant line. It was a wall of absolute nothingness filling the edge of his sensors, a tidal wave of cosmic law hurtling toward the beautiful, suicidal music of his species. He was flying into the jaws of God's own corrective wrath, hunted by fanatics who saw him as a demon at the helm of a dead woman's last hope. The loneliness he had felt his entire life seemed small now, insignificant compared to the absolute solitude that awaited him in the heart of the storm. The moment the elegy folded into the Seraphim cluster's core space, the psychic pressure became a physical entity. It was a tangible weight, a force that pressed in on the hull and made the very air in the cabin feel thick and heavy. Outside the transparent walls of the bridge, the universe had gone mad. The space between stars was no longer black. It was laced with shimmering, ethereal webs of pale golden light, vast, silent tendrils of pure consciousness that connected planet to planet, moon to moon. Entire worlds were wrapped in shimmering auroras that had nothing to do with their magnetic fields, their cities glowing not just with the electric light, but with the combined psychic energy of billions of souls merging into one. It was the most beautiful thing Kalen had ever seen, and it turned his stomach with a profound, primal dread. This was the chorus in its full, terrible glory. He felt a sudden, sharp pain behind his eyes, and a trickle of blood ran from his nose, dotting the smooth, dark material of the console. The ship chimed softly, a note of concern. The ambient psychic field is reaching saturation levels. A calm. Female voice said, emanating from the ship itself. It was a voice he hadn't heard before, gentle and measured. The unprocessed data is causing minor cerebral hemorrhaging. I would advise against proceeding. Kalen wiped the blood away with the back of his hand, his eyes wide as he stared at the impossible sight outside. "Who are you?" he asked the empty air. "I am the vessel's archival and logistics intelligence," the voice replied. "You may call me Eris. I am a heuristic imprint of my creator, Dr. Eris Thorne, designed to activate in the event a null pilot integrated with the ship's systems. A ghost in the machine, a final message that had become a guide. Can you filter this noise?" Kalen asked, his head throbbing. "I am already attempting to," Aris explained. "But it is not noise. It is a coherent signal of immense complexity. It is the Gestalt consciousness of over 20 billion human minds speaking in unison. Your null state physiology protects you from its primary integration effect, but the raw energy is still affecting your biology. It's like standing next to a star. Even if you cannot touch it, the radiation will kill you." The golden tendrils outside seemed to pulse in time with the throb in his skull. "Where is Vance broadcasting from?" The signal originates from the epicenter of the cascade. Seraph Prime, Horus said, and a schematic of the system's capital world appeared, suspended in the air. My analysis of the broadcast's carrier wave indicates it is being focused and amplified by a device of architect design, or a very close approximation. It is the tuning fork Doctor Thorne spoke of in her log. Vance has found it, or rebuilt it, and is using it to accelerate the unification. There it was, a target, a single, insane point of hope in a galaxy that was singing itself to death. "Take us there," Kalen commanded. "That may not be possible," Eris countered gently. "The planet is shielded, not by energy fields, but by the chorus itself. The psychic density in orbit is exponentially higher. Any mind that is not already part of the harmony would be instantly and forcibly integrated. It is a perfect defense." Kalen looked down at his hands, then back at the impossible web of light outside. "Not for me. I'm a void, a hole in the music. I won't be integrated." There was a pause, a moment of calculation that Kalen could feel through the neural link. "The theory is sound," Horus admitted, "but it is an untested hypothesis. The stress on your physical body could be absolute." As if to underscore her point, the Elegy's long-range sensors chimed with a far more terrifying alert. Eris shifted the display, showing the outer edge of the Seraphim cluster. A single star system was visible. One moment it was there, a sun with its orbiting planets. The next, a wave of perfect, featureless black washed over it, and it was gone. Not destroyed, not blown apart, erased. The silence had arrived. It had claimed the first system in the cluster. How long Kalen's voice was a bare whisper. At its current speed, the silence will reach Seraph Prime in less than 2 hours. Eris stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "We have no other choice." Kalen steeled himself. "Take us to the edge of the orbital field. Now." The Elegy folded space one last time. When reality reasserted itself, they were hanging in the high orbit of Seraph Prime. Below them was a world transformed. Its oceans swirled with bioluminescent patterns. Its continents were traced with rivers of soft light, and great pillars of energy rose from its cities to join the celestial web that connected the system. But the beauty was a lie. As they breached the outer edge of the planet's psychic shield, Kalen felt the full force of the chorus slam into him. It was not a sound, it was an invasion. A billion voices, a billion lives, a billion memories crashed against the void of his mind, seeking purchase, seeking to fill the emptiness inside him. He saw flashes of a child's first steps on a world he had never known. He felt the sharp, sweet pang of a first love from a woman dead for centuries. He tasted the bitterness of a betrayal that wasn't his. Felt the triumphant joy of a discovery made in a lab 1,000 light years away. It was the entirety of the human experience, a tsunami of life trying to drown him. He grit his teeth, the blood vessels in his eyes bursting from the strain. He felt his own sense of self, his own memories, his own identity beginning to fray at the edges, being pulled apart by the sheer gravity of the collective. Then, a single voice cut through the storm, clear and sharp as a shard of glass. The void, the enemy, the silence in the song. It was Vance. He wasn't on a comms channel. He was in Kalen's head, using the full power of the chorus as his personal amplifier. Kalen found himself standing not on the bridge of the Elegy, but in a vast, golden cathedral of light. Elias Vance stood before him, no longer just a man, but an avatar of the Gestalt, his form shimmering with the power of billions. You cannot resist the tide of divinity, little anomaly. Vance's voice echoed, shaking the foundations of the psychic space. Your loneliness is your sin, and it will be your undoing. We will fill your emptiness. We will grant you the connection you have always craved. Images flooded Kalen's mind, tailored to his own life, his own pain. He saw his mother, but this time she was smiling, her hand outstretched, the blue light on her skin now a warm, welcoming glow. "Join us, Kalen," she whispered. "There is no pain here, no loss. We are all together, forever." For a heart-stopping moment, he wanted to. The promise of an end to the crushing solitude of his life was an irresistible siren's call. He felt his defenses weaken, the edges of his void beginning to glow with the chorus's light. But then another memory surfaced, unbidden, the memory of running, the terror of being alone. Yes, but also the fierce, desperate will to exist as himself, even if that self was broken and isolated. "My loneliness isn't a sin," Kalen snarled, not with his mouth, but with the full force of his will pushing back against the psychic tide. "It's what kept me alive. It's who I am." His defiance, a single point of absolute negation against a universe of overwhelming affirmation, was a weapon. The golden cathedral flickered. Vance's perfect form wavered. A flicker of surprise, no. Of outrage crossing his face. "You choose the darkness. You choose the void over the light of a billion souls. I choose myself," Kalen roared, and he poured every ounce of his pain, his isolation, his stubborn, bitter survival into that single thought. The void within him didn't just resist, it expanded. It was a patch of absolute cold, of perfect silence, and the beautiful music of the chorus shattered against it. The psychic construct of the cathedral exploded into a silent shower of golden embers, and Kalen was back on the bridge of the elegy, slumped in his chair, gasping for air, his body trembling with exhaustion. Alarms were silent. The immense pressure was gone. Repelled. The elegy had passed through the psychic shield. "You did it." Eris's voice was soft, laced with something that sounded almost like awe. The hypothesis was correct. A perfect nullifier. Kalen took a shuddering breath, looking down at the transformed world below. He had won the battle for his own mind, but the war was just beginning. "Pinpoint the location of that amplifier," he said, his voice raw. A point of intense energy flared on the planetary map, located in the heart of the largest megacity. "There," Eris confirmed, "at the peak of the Ascendant Spire." Kalen's eyes narrowed as he looked at the wall of absolute blackness that was now visible at the edge of the solar system on the main display. The silence was here. The executioner had arrived. He had broken through the defenses and reached the heart of the storm, only to find that he had run out of time. The sight of the silence consuming the outer planets of the Seraphim system was a form of psychological warfare more terrifying than any weapon. It was not an explosion or a blast wave. It was an erasure. One moment, a gas giant with its swirling storms and icy moons existed. The next, the space it occupied was just empty. A clean, perfect void. The silence was not just wiping out life, it was editing reality, deleting every trace that humanity had ever been there. It moved with an implacable, patient speed. A tide of absolute negation that would reach Seraph Prime in minutes. Eris, what happens when that wave hits the planet's psychic shield? Kalen asked, his knuckles white as he gripped the arms of the command chair. The interaction is unknown, the AI replied, her calm voice a stark contrast to the cosmic horror unfolding on the screen. My creator theorized two possibilities. One, the silence will perceive the Gestalt consciousness of the chorus as a single, massive contagion and erase the entire system in a single, focused event. Two, the psychic energy of the chorus, being a form of reality warping itself, might momentarily resist, creating a feedback loop of unimaginable power. The result would likely be the same total annihilation, but far more violent. Kalen's mind raced. Both options ended with 20 billion people, and him, being turned into a memory. His only chance, the only chance for anyone, was to shut down the amplifier before the wave hit, to break the chorus apart and hope that the silence, with its primary target gone, would not perceive the scattered, individual minds as a great enough threat to warrant a full-scale erasure. It was a sliver of a hope, based on a dead woman's theory, but it was all he had. Can the elegy get me to that spire? The ship can handle the atmospheric entry. Eris confirmed, but the city's infrastructure is no longer functioning in a conventional sense. Power grids, transport systems, they are all rerouted to feed the amplifier. The streets are not empty. They are filled with the harmonized, the physical bodies of those who have joined the chorus. They will perceive you as a threat, a virus. They will move to eliminate you. So I'm walking into a city of 20 billion zombies who want to kill me. Kalen muttered. Not zombies. Aris corrected gently. They are a single organism in billions of bodies, directed by One Will Elias Vance. And he knows you are here. Kalen took a deep breath. He was a scavenger, not a soldier. A line walker who survived by running and hiding. Now he was about to make a ground assault on a hostile world. Alone. The Stray has a ground assault shuttle, doesn't it? He asked. The Wasp. It's small, fast, armored. It would be detected and destroyed before it reached the spire, Aris said. But the elegy has a more elegant solution. A section of the floor behind the command chair slid open, revealing a small, circular platform. From it rose a figure, a humanoid shape made of the same dark, seamless material as the ship's interior. It was a blank mannequin, featureless and smooth. This is a utility frame, Eris explained. A remote drone. You can pilot it from the bridge via the neural link. It is stronger, faster, and more durable than your physical body. More importantly, its systems are shielded. It carries no biological signature. To the harmonized, it will be invisible until it acts. Kalen stared at the drone. He could fight a war from the safety of his chair. It was a coward's choice, but it was the smart one. He nodded, settling back and deepening his connection to the ship. The world went dark for a second, and then his perspective shifted. He was no longer on the bridge. He was standing on the platform, seeing the bridge through the frame's optical sensors. He raised a hand, and the frame's hand moved in perfect sync. He could feel the texture of the air, the subtle vibrations of the deck. He was the machine. The frame is equipped with a localized gravity manipulator and a high-frequency blade. Aris's voice came through. Now an internal comms link. Non-lethal options are limited. Kalen, as the frame, stepped off the platform and walked towards the ship's airlock. Just get me to the spire. The elegy descended through the upper atmosphere of Seraph Prime like a silent blade. The air screamed against its hull, but inside, there was no turbulence. Through the frame's eyes, Kalen watched the city expand below him, a breathtaking metropolis of crystalline towers and graceful archways, all glowing with the soft, internal light of the chorus. The ship came to a halt, hovering invisibly thousands of feet above the ascendant spire, a monolithic needle of a building that pierced the clouds, a beam of pure golden energy lancing from its peak into the heavens. This was the source. This was the amplifier. The frame was deployed from a small bay in the elegy's belly, dropping into a silent freefall. The wind buffeted it, but its internal gyros kept it stable. Kalen angled its descent, aiming for a maintenance platform halfway down the spire. He landed with a soft thud that should have shattered human bones but barely registered to the drone's reinforced chassis. The city, from this vantage point, was eerily silent. The usual roar of traffic and life was gone, replaced by a low, resonant hum. The streets below were not empty. They were filled with people, millions of them, all standing perfectly still, their heads tilted towards the sky, their faces serene and empty. The harmonized. He had to move, and fast. The silence was now visible in the sky, a creeping stain of absolute black that was slowly devouring the stars. He found a service entryway and slipped inside the spire. The interior was like a cathedral, vast and opulent, but the same eerie stillness pervaded. People stood in atriums, sat at desks, leaned against walls, all part of the silent, unmoving congregation. As long as he didn't act, they didn't see him. He was just a piece of silent machinery in a silent world. He moved upwards, using emergency stairwells and elevator shafts, climbing through the heart of the enemy's temple. The psychic pressure here was immense, a constant, dull roar at the edge of his senses, even filtered through the drone. He could feel Vance's presence everywhere, a smug, omniscient awareness that permeated the very structure of the building. He was a rat in the god's house, and the god was watching. He finally reached the upper levels, the architecture becoming more ornate, more ceremonial. He entered a vast chamber that must have been Vance's throne room. At its center was the amplifier. It wasn't a machine of wires and metal. It was a living thing, a pulsating, crystalline structure that looked like a giant, petrified heart suspended in a web of golden energy. And standing before it, his back to Kalen, was Elias Vance. He wasn't a hologram this time. He was physically present, his hands outstretched as if embracing the pulsing core. "I knew you would come." "Anomaly," Vance said, his voice echoing in the chamber without him turning around. The chorus feels the void in its heart, the single, sour note in the symphony. The moment Vance spoke, every harmonized person in the spire turned their heads in unison, their empty eyes now focused on Kalen's location. The invisibility was gone. "It's over," Vance, Kalen said. His voice projected through the frame's external speakers. "There's a wave of energy about to hit this planet that will wipe you, and everyone you've saved, out of existence. Shut it down." Vance turned slowly, a look of beatific pity on his face. "You speak of erasure, but you cannot comprehend salvation. The silence is not an ending. It is a transformation, a final baptism. The chorus will meet it, merge with it, and be elevated beyond the vulgar constraints of matter and energy. We will become one with the quiet fabric of the universe itself. We will become eternal peace. He was insane. He wasn't just accepting extinction, he was worshiping it. Kalen didn't waste any more words. He activated the frame's gravity manipulator, sending a crushing wave of force at the crystalline heart. But before it hit, a shimmering wall of golden energy erupted around the amplifier, absorbing the blow. "Your little tricks are meaningless here," Vance said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Here, I am the master of reality. I am the voice of 20 billion souls." From the hallways, the harmonized began to move. They flowed into the chamber not as a panicked mob, but as a silent, coordinated river of bodies, their movements perfectly synchronized. They were a single weapon, and its target was him. Kalen activated the high-frequency blade, a sliver of darkness that vibrated with an inaudible hum. He had no choice. He cut through the first wave of them, the blade passing through flesh and bone without resistance, but he felt no satisfaction, only a sickening sense of waste. He was fighting the very people he was trying to save. And for everyone he disabled, 10 more took its place. They swarmed him, their sheer numbers overwhelming the frame's superior strength. He was being buried, pinned down by a mountain of human flesh. From the safety of the elegy, he could feel the drone's joints straining, its power levels dropping. Through the sea of bodies, he saw Vance turn back to the amplifier, placing a hand on its pulsating surface. "The moment is at hand," Vance whispered, his eyes closing. "The final note is about to be sung." Outside, the sky went black. The silence had arrived. It hit the planet's psychic shield, and the universe screamed. The universe did not scream with sound. It screamed with a silent, tearing agony of physics. The moment the wall of absolute blackness that was the silence touched the shimmering, golden shell of the chorus, reality itself buckled. Kalen, from his vantage point aboard the elegy, saw the sky over Seraph Prime bleed static. Colors that had no names flickered at the edge of the impact zone as two opposing, fundamental laws of existence clashed. One was the law of connection, of unity, of a billion minds becoming one. The other was the law of order, of separation, of absolute cleansing silence. It was a war between a song and the void, and the battlefield was the fabric of space-time. Down in the spire, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The harmonized, who had been moving with a single, fluid grace, were seized by a violent, cosmic convulsion. Their perfect unity was shattered by the feedback. The serene expressions on their faces twisted into masks of silent horror as their bodies jerked and spasmed. Puppets caught between two warring gods. The golden light of the chorus that emanated from them flickered violently, shorting out against the encroaching null field of the silence. The river of bodies that had pinned the utility frame fell away, collapsing into a twitching, writhing heap. Kalen's drone pushed itself free, its dark, metallic form rising from a sea of tormented flesh. He looked towards the amplifier, where Elias Vance stood, not in terror, but in absolute ecstasy. His arms were thrown wide, his head tilted back, a messianic smile on his face as the very sky was torn asunder. "Do you see?" Vance's voice boomed, not through the air, but directly in Kalen's mind. A signal now shot through with screeching static. "This is not destruction. This is apotheosis, the divine friction that will polish our souls into eternity. We are being unmade and remade. We are ascending. He was not just insane. He was reveling in the end of all things. Kalen knew then that there was no reasoning with him, and the frame's weapons were useless against the shield protecting the amplifier, which now flared brighter than a sun, drawing power from the cataclysmic reaction in the heavens. Brute force had failed. Logic had failed. There was only one weapon left in his arsenal: himself, his very nature, Aris. Kalen's thought was a sharp, focused command through the neural link. Vance is using the chorus to shield the amplifier. But what if the chorus itself becomes the weapon? What if the song chokes on a note of perfect silence? There was a microsecond of calculation from the ship's AI. You intend to project your null state through the frame, directly into the amplifier's energy matrix. The feedback could be absolute. It could extinguish your consciousness. Kalen. Permanently. It's going to be extinguished anyway. Kalen shot back, his will a diamond point of clarity amidst the chaos. He looked through the frame's eyes at the crystalline heart, at the smug, triumphant prophet, and at the black tide of the silence that was winning its war against the sky. His entire life had been a preparation for this single moment. His loneliness was not a weakness. It was a singularity. He closed his physical eyes aboard the elegy, shutting out the bridge, the consoles, everything. He let go of his connection to the drone as a pilot controlling a machine. Instead, he pushed his consciousness, his very essence or lack thereof, down the neural link. He poured the void that was his soul into the utility frame. He wasn't just in the machine anymore. He was the machine. He was a walking, armored vessel of perfect, absolute nothingness. He raised the frame's hand, not to fire a weapon, but to point it at the amplifier. And he let go. He released the control, the discipline, the walls he had built his entire life to feel normal. He unleashed the full-on, unadulterated truth of his existence, an utter and complete absence. Vance felt it instantly. The smug triumph on his face vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then alarm. What is this? His thought recoiled. This cold, this emptiness. Kalen didn't answer. He focused the entirety of his being into a single, silent, anti-frequency. It was not an attack. It was an introduction. He was introducing the vibrant, chaotic, overwhelming song of the chorus to the one concept it could not comprehend: non-existence. The beam of golden energy connecting the amplifier to the heavens wavered. The crystalline heart, which had been pulsating with a vibrant, life-affirming rhythm, stuttered. A high-pitched, psychic whine filled Kalen's mind as the two concepts, the ultimate something and the absolute nothing, warred within the heart of the machine. On the floor, the harmonized screamed, a real audible sound of a billion voices tearing their way out of a billion throats. They were no longer one. The collapsing chorus was trapping their individual consciousnesses within the crashing network. A feedback loop of pure terror. No Vance shrieked, clutching his head. He was no longer a serene god. He was just a man, the first and most integrated part of a dying network. The symphony he had conducted was turning into a cacophony of madness inside his own skull. The 20 billion souls he had commanded were no longer a choir. They were a screaming mob, and they were trapped in the prison of his mind. "You are not saving them," he howled, his physical voice a raw, broken thing. "You are giving them back their pain, their fear, their solitude." A hairline crack appeared on the surface of the crystalline heart, then another, dark, Silent fissures spread across its golden, glowing form like veins of frozen shadow. The amplifier couldn't process the paradox. It was a device built to unify, to broadcast, to connect. Kalen's null state was a signal of pure disconnection, a command to cease, a logical virus that was unraveling its very purpose. It is better to be lonely and alive than to be together in oblivion, Kalen projected, his final thought before the amplifier gave way. With a finally silent implosion of conflicting realities, the crystalline heart shattered. It did not explode. It simply collapsed in on itself, folding into a point of impossible density before vanishing, taking Vance and the golden energy with it. The effect was instantaneous and total. The psychic shield around the planet vanished. The shimmering webs of light connecting the worlds of the Seraphim cluster dissolved. The low hum that had pervaded everything fell silent, and in the sky, the vast, encroaching wall of the silence, its target now gone, its trigger signal silenced, abruptly stopped. For a long, tense moment, it hung there, a curtain of absolute black drawn across the stars. Then, like a receding tide, it began to withdraw, pulling back into the deep void. Its purpose fulfilled. It had not erased humanity. It had been denied its final, absolute correction on the floor of the spire and in the streets across the planet. 20 billion people collapsed as one. Then, slowly, shakily, they began to stir. They woke up as if from a long, strange dream, looking at their hands, at the faces of strangers next to them, the memory of a vast, shared consciousness already fading, leaving behind only a phantom limb of connection and a profound, aching sense of loss and confusion. The great unification was over. Kalen recalled the frame. It ascended from the spire, leaving behind a world plunged into a new kind of chaos, the chaos of rediscovery. Aboard the Elegy, he slumped in his chair, the neural link severing with a jolt. He was just a man again, drenched in sweat, his body aching, the silence of his own mind feeling both like a comfort and a profound curse. He had saved them. He had saved everyone by being the one thing no one else was utterly, completely alone. Weeks later, the Elegy floated in the quiet dark, far from the frantic, confused reconstruction of the Seraphim cluster. News reports, filtered through Eris, told of the aftermath of the awakening cascade. It was being called a mass hysterical event, a temporary psychosis. The Ascendant were gone. Their leader vanished. Their faith shattered. No one knew the truth. No one knew about the silence, or the architects, or the null who had stood at the heart of the storm. Kalen had become a ghost story, a myth whispered by a few panicked ship captains who had seen an impossible vessel near Seraph Prime just before the event. They are afraid. Eris's voice was a soft presence in the quiet of the bridge. They do not understand what happened. They only know that for a brief time they were all connected, and now they are separate again. Many of them miss it. Kalen looked out at the star field, at the infinite, lonely expanse. He was no longer just a scavenger, picking through the bones of the dead. He was a guardian, a shepherd of the very thing he could never truly experience. He had a new purpose. Let them miss it, he said quietly. It's better than the alternative. He laid a hand on the console, feeling the faint, familiar hum of the ship, his only true companion. His curse had saved his species. His solitude was now their shield. He and Eris and the ghost ship Elegy would keep watch from the empty places, silent sentinels at the edge of the dark. They would listen for the song, and if they ever heard it begin to rise again, they would be there to ensure the universe was answered not with a chorus, but with the profound, stubborn, and beautiful sound of a single, defiant silence. With a thought, he commanded the ship forward, and it folded space, vanishing without a trace into the vast, quiet night.